All right, so good evening, and thanks everyone for joining us for, well, I think everybody knows, but I'm Laura Hartmann, Chair of Town of Ulster Citizens.org, and I would also like to recognize our Deputy Chair, Regis Obajiski. Regis, wave, hi. I would like to acknowledge our elected officials that are here on this meeting, Town Supervisor Jim Quigley and Town Councilman Clayton Van Cleek. And we also have Brian Cahill, who is our county legislator for most of the districts in the town of Ulster. I don't forget the number, but and thank you all to the rest of you who are here. And Evelyn, you're not elected, but you're certainly a dignitary. Always, when you visit the town of Ulster, we always appreciate your being here and all you do for the town of Ulster. So I want to start by giving you some background on what you're going to see tonight. Back in February, Amanda Laval, the director of the Ulster County Department of the Environment, called to ask me if Town of Ulster citizens would be willing to work with graduate students at Bard College to do the climate smart analysis of the town of Ulster. I'm going to start that sentence again since we had a couple of people. And one is welcome to John Morrow. I think that's you, right, John? Yeah, another town councilman. Thanks for joining us, John. And hi, Dan.
Hello.
All right, I'm just going to start that again since we had a couple of people join on. I'd like to give you some background on what you're going to see tonight. Back in February, Amanda Laval, the director of the Ulster County Department of the Environment, called to ask me if Town of Ulster citizens would be willing to work with graduate students at Bard College to do the climate smart analysis of the town of Ulster. What does that mean? And that's exactly what I asked her. It means that in partnership with the Bard College Center for Environmental Policy graduate program, the county offered 2 municipalities in Ulster County the opportunity to partner with Professor Monique Segarra's class Politics of Solutions this spring in the completion of a climate smart resiliency planning tool and accompanying gap analysis report. They chose the town of Ulster and the town of Rochester. The climate smart resiliency planning tool is an action that municipalities may complete under the New York State Climate Smart Communities Program. It was developed as a non-regulatory tool to help local decision makers identify planning and adaptation opportunities to reduce their community's vulnerability to climate hazards, such as extreme precipitation, flooding, storm surge, sea level rise, extreme heat, heat waves, as evidenced today, and drought. The tool is intended to initiate a facilitated discussion among local decision makers with the objective of identifying opportunities to improve local planning through incorporation of climate change considerations. By completing this self-assessment, local leaders can identify means to improve their resilience through existing planning, outreach, hazard mitigation, and response mechanisms. I thought this was a great idea for the students and an opportunity that gave them real practical experience in their chosen field. It also seemed like a great opportunity for the town of Ulster for us all to learn more about how our town can further protect ourselves from the ravages of climate change and begin that discussion on making climate smart pledge. As you can see in the map, I forgot to put up, hold on a second. Share. Okay, as you can see in this map, we are just one of the few towns in the county who have yet to make this climate smart pledge. So once we took on the challenge, I worked with Europa McGovern, Senior Environmental Resource Technician for the county, and we put together the documents that the students would need to do their research. We had our first meeting on March 26th, and they had approximately 6 weeks to complete their investigation. I can tell you they did a lot of work in a short amount of time. And one day, Tara Ryan and I even took Eli Howard and Ibrahim on a 3-hour tour of the town of Ulster, visiting as many places as we could that were relevant to their work. Today's presentation is the result of what they observed and what they investigated. It's been a great pleasure working with the students. Really, it's been an honor. And I would like now to let you hear a few words from their professor, Monique Segarra. I know this project turned into much more work than they anticipated, and Monique was incredibly generous with class time for making this happen. And to her, I would like to say a big thank you for your support and encouragement. Monique, I turn the floor over to you.
Sure, thank you, Laura. And I do want to say, honestly, for us, that doing this gap analysis, doing this exercise has been such a positive impact on our program. So we're a 2-year master's program. It's interdisciplinary, it's science-based. And my class, The Politics of Solutions, is at the second semester of the first year. And what has really benefited us is not just to look at solutions to different kinds of climate threats from this sort of abstract level, just through articles, et cetera, but to really try to understand the leadership roles that states and localities and counties are playing in thinking about innovations around climate issues and resilience and opportunities for economic growth and green growth. And this really, I have to say to you, this is where the action is and has been for the past decade, if not more. It's really at the local level. And I think for our students, and they can speak for themselves, sadly, Ibrahim is not here. He's out of the country, so he couldn't be on this presentation. But I think for them, it was a real eye-opener to look at the real challenges, the cost challenges, the decision-making challenges that towns and counties are having to make in terms of managing their emergency plans, dealing with flooding issues, and thinking about infrastructure. So for us, it has been such a grounding experience that we are building this in going forward into our curriculum. And it's also a benefit to have college or university locally to be able to contribute to communities to really help in whatever way we can to this collective effort in terms of assessing, not just threats, but opportunities to make our localities, our towns more resilient. And so my program has been working with the town of Rhinebeck. In addition, BARD works extensively with Red Hook and now with Kingston. So I would say not just in our program, but BARD at large is very interested in poised to try to offer whatever intellectual services that we can to help the communities within which we live. So it has really been our pleasure, and we're very grateful.
Thank you. Thank you. The other person who's been instrumental in making this happen is Europa McGovern. Without your support and your experience and guidance, we would never have made it through. I wouldn't have gotten through even the preparation of getting the materials ready for the students without you. You taught me a lot, and I know you taught the students a lot. And I'm grateful to have had the chance to get to know you. And I know that we're just very lucky in Ulster County to have you on our team. So thank you. If you would say something.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Laura. Good evening, everyone. I'm Europa McGovern with the County Department of the Environment. I just want to also say thank you to everyone who made this project possible. A lot of you are on the Zoom tonight. Professor Segarra, you and your 3 students that worked so hard on this project the past few months. Eli and Howard, who are presenting tonight. I'm really excited to hear you present on your work and see it come to fruition. Thank you, of course, to everyone. Some of you here tonight who shared information and resources along the way. There's a lot of information to disseminate, and a lot of plans and policies and ordinances were reviewed as part of this. And especially, Laura, a huge thank you to you for connecting with the students directly and providing support to them, especially throughout, and to Tara Ryan and other stakeholders as well. Really, it wouldn't have been possible without everyone's collective engagement with this. And I just want to say that our primary goal for the project was to provide a beneficial learning opportunity for the students. So I hope we get to pick your brains afterwards and hear your feedback on your experience about that. And then our other goal was to bring this opportunity to 2 towns, like Laura mentioned, in the county. And the other one was the town of Rochester, where the students presented on their project last month. And then I just wanted to provide some really brief context on engagement with this tool here in Ulster County. So the County Department of the Environment facilitate completion of the tool for the county itself in the fall of last year. And this was one of the first steps that the county is taking towards development of a countywide climate adaptation plan. And then in addition to the BARD project with Rochester as well, at least 5 other municipalities, to my knowledge, in the county are completing the tool this year with support from Cornell Cooperative Extension staff. And then the last item on that is that it counts as a standalone action under the New York State Climate Smart Communities program. And I just want to close with saying that although the tool does not provide all the answers on how and where to integrate planning for future climate change, you know, into and across all municipal plans, policies, and ordinances, you know, by asking this series of structured questions, it really does spur the conversation locally and spurs the beginnings of that communication among local stakeholders. And that at least it provides a starting place, you know, for that future integration. And with that, back to you, Laura. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
All right. Thank you, Europa. And since we have our county legislator here, Brian, is there anything you want to say about this before we get going? You have to,
unmute there, sorry. You know, I'm just glad that we had this opportunity to have the BARD students working on this project, and hopefully that, you know, the results of their work will spur the town into, you know, taking the pledge. We're one of the few towns left. 2 of the towns that I represent in the legislature are 2 of the towns that have not taken the pledge yet. So I'm hoping that, you know, this information will help those towns take the pledge and become climate smart communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, so let's get on to the presentation. But before we begin, I just want to say that we thought a lot about how to make this presentation tonight. We decided that it would be best to highlight areas where the town has made great strides in battling climate change, to look at the areas where there is room for improvement, and to also show us sources of funding for making improvements. This way we could all see how making the Climate Smart Pledge could benefit the town of Ulster. I want to be clear, the students are not here to tell us what to do, but just to share with us the results of their work using a standardized assessment tool. Well, that and the fact that this presentation is part of their grade. And also, I just want to say that this will not be a detailed inventory of everything the town has done to mitigate against climate change. I just want to say that for the record, but they have covered a lot of territory in this report. So we're going to let the students give their full presentation. If you have any questions, you can write them in the chat or ask them afterwards. We'll make sure that there's a chance for a Q&A. I have to say I've really enjoyed working with these 2 gentlemen, and of course Ibrahim, who cannot be here with us tonight. They had a difficult task, but they took it very seriously and really dug into this topic. So it's my honor to introduce Eli Goldstein and Howard Pollard, graduate students from the Center for Environmental Policy at Bard College. Take it away, gentlemen.
Thank you so much for that very thorough introduction. Thank you, Monique, for bringing this all together. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Put simply, we are here to present to you our analysis of the town of Ulster's gap between where it currently stands and greater levels of climate resiliency. Next slide, please. So, as we've all noticed, there are increasingly extreme and frequent weather events that are creating more natural hazards to everything we have set up and that we must live with. Towns, regional organizations, and states all have to upgrade their resiliency in order to adapt to these future conditions to avoid damages to property and life today and in the future. This is how we reduce the exposure and vulnerability of Hudson Valley citizens and infrastructure. Oh, frankly, we show people how it's done. Speaking of climate disasters, next slide, please. one way that it shows itself is in the increase in temperatures, not just in terms of averages, but in terms of extreme heat waves that create issues with health and drought. And when we were mentioning more of those extreme weather events, we were talking about something like this. This was taken in Phoenicia when Hurricane Irene came just 10 years ago.
It is a river down Main Street.
Dude, do you want to try to reinforce their thing real quick?
There's no way. It's not worth it. As much of a nice gesture it is, there's nothing you can do now.
Please cut this down. Narrator has already called it for us here. And these are the sort of things we are hoping to prevent. This kind of damage, this kind of threat to life. And this is where we see where we begin and where we have yet to go. Please keep in mind, this is in Phoenicia, roughly 30 miles west of the town of Ulster and still within Ulster County. Next slide, please. The reason that this flooding did not visit the town of Ulster and other communities along the lower Esopus Creek comes down to the Ashokan Reservoir. At the time when Hurricane Irene hit, it was below capacity, which means it had extra room for heightened upper Esopus Creek flow and all of that extra rainfall. However, this also begs the question of how the town of Ulster can respond when there isn't that extra capacity, and begs the question of what would happen should something with the reservoir itself give way and potentially threaten the town. This is why it is important to come up with plans to shore up the town of Ulster's resiliency. Next slide, please.
So we all know the town of Ulster. It's a municipality in Ulster County, and it's a very unique situation because it's made up of a number of hamlets, which lead to a diversity of environments, industries, populations across all these different hamlets. As we've learned from spending time in Ulster and doing our research, there's also a number of economic, environmental, and resilience concerns in the town governance. The town is home to one of the commercial centers of the Hudson Valley along Route 9W, as well as the former home of IBM, now called Tech City, not to mention agriculture and farming community. And environmentally, because the town sits on the banks of the Hudson and hosts a stretch of the lower Esopus Creek and the Rondeau Creek, there's potentially a wide range of challenges related to changing climates. What we see here is a FEMA flood map of the Lake Katrine area in the town of Ulster. In blue, we see the 1% annual chance of flood hazard. That's also called the 100-year flood risk. The chance of having an extreme flood every 100 years. That's the blue area. The orange area is a little less likely, the 0.2% annual chance of flood hazard, but we can see how much such a big flood would wipe out. And the area in blue and orange, the stripes, is the regulatory floodway. So that we do see residential structures in that area as well. So the chance of flooding along the Esopus is already very real. And that does not take into account rising sea levels due to climate change. The New York State Water Resource Institute estimates that we're looking at about 3 to 6 feet of average sea level rise by 2050. And the sea level rise will affect both the Hudson River and the floodplains in the town of Ulster. We found this tool created by Columbia University Center for International Earth Science that allows you to project potential damages from a 100-year storm, depending on different sea level rises throughout the Hudson Valley. So we could predict it specifically for the town of Ulster for these 3 different potential sea level rise scenarios. 6 feet, we see with just 2 feet of sea level rise and one of these 100-year storms, we're looking at over $1 million in damages, plus a number of other infrastructure damages and damages to the natural environment. And that continues to go up. If we're looking at the 3 feet that the New York State Water Resource Institute is estimating as the low range of sea level rise, we're looking at over 2 million of damages with a flood, with a big flood. With all that in mind, we set out to identify these key threats to the town of Ulster, as well as opportunities for the town to become more resilient to these threats. And here's just a little more of a brief background about who we are, for anybody who missed it, or just from our side. We're graduate students at Bard Center for Environmental Policy. We've been studying climate science and policy and economics related to climate and the environment for the last year. We just completed our first year of the program. And as Monique mentioned, as part of her class, Politics of Solution, we set out to create this gap analysis. Not only are we students, but Howard and I both live in the Hudson Valley. I've been here for the last 3+ years. Howard more recently for school, but has settled down here now. So we both spent time exploring the town of Ulster, both the commercial areas and the town's parks and trails. And like Laura mentioned, she took us on a extensive tour of the town. We saw everything from Tech City to the glide path site, to the solar farms, to the parks and other sites of interest. And these experiences combined with the research that we did gave us a pretty good understanding hamlets, and because of all the different terrains and economic areas, we really were struck by how unique Ulster is. And the distinct strengths and opportunities that creates for the town, especially facing changing climates. Furthermore, as residents of the area, we care deeply about where we live. And we've been really inspired to be able to do this work, not only for our education and learning about how local governance works, but also directly supporting the growth and resilience of a local community means a lot to us. So moving on to the gap analysis, we had 4 key goals as we set out to do this. The first was to define local, natural, and climate-related hazards. The second was to identify existing and future strengths and vulnerabilities for the town. Third was to make specific recommendations for actions that could reduce risks and increase resilience. Recommendations. I think like Europa mentioned, or possibly Laura, our summary of findings is really just a starting point. The Climate Smart Resiliency Planning Tool and our gap analysis are just one perspective and a framework that really requires the town and the town government and stakeholders in the community to get involved with comments and feedback and really decide what matters the most to them and to the town to move forward to deal with these potential hazards and community resilience. So just a little more background on the Climate Smart Resiliency Planning Tool. It's a pretty extensive spreadsheet over 6 pages that deals with a number of issues related to changing climates and resiliency. And those 6 areas, the first one is kind of an overview of all the documents and information that needed to be collected in order to complete the tool. And Laura and Europa, and I think Laura had some help from other folks in the local government, compiled a pretty extensive list of town documents, including the ones listed below, as well as the Ulster County Multi-Jurisdictional Hazard Mitigation Plan, which the town participates in and has filed updates to periodically since the implementation of that plan. But going back to the previous slide, I just wanted to lay out the 5 sections of the tool just so you have an idea. After the checklist section, there's a section about vulnerability and risk assessment, which deals with identifying hazards to people and infrastructure. There's a section about public outreach, which explores how the town engages the public on issues of resilience and integration section, which looks at how the municipal plans and laws are integrated with each other and with county laws for resilience and organization. There's a preparedness and recovery section, which examines existing plans for when disasters do occur and plans for recovery following these disasters. And then finally, there's a hazard mitigation section, which looks at what steps the town has taken already to mitigate these potential hazards. So after we completed the tool, we were able to put together an overview of the key strengths and opportunities that the town had to deal with climate resilience. I'm going to start with the strengths. The Town Comprehensive Plan is a major area of strength. It addresses a number of important ways to become more resilient and deal with changing climates and also deal with hazards and development in the town, including protecting groundwater resources to ensure that the quantity and quality of water is available to serve future needs, protecting the town's scenic views, rural atmosphere, and natural qualities, providing greater protection for ridge lines from inappropriate development, preserving open spaces to buffer development and to preserve the area's scenic vistas, promoting innovative land use management and building construction techniques, and factoring in the presence of floodplains when the town zoning board reviews site plans and subdivision applications. So these are all existing goals in the current Town of Ulster Comprehensive Plan, which was completed in 2007. The town also has shown a commitment to hosting transformative energy projects, which support economic development, environmental, clean environment of climate smart communities. The Cypress Creek Renewables Landau Solar Farm in Eddyville was completed and provides a large amount of renewable energy for the town. And Glide Path's Lincoln Park project is underway and looks to create a lot of battery storage to support renewable energy. The town also has already taken action to mitigate risks from flooding. There's a flood damage prevention law aimed at minimizing public and private loss due to flood conditions. The town already participates in the FEMA National Flood Insurance Program and has engaged with FEMA programs for training town administrators and staff about flood risk and management practices. And the town has also participated in the National Weather Service Turnaround Don't Drown program by installing flood awareness signs at various locations along the Esopus Creek, which we see a picture of here when flood. Other areas of strength include the town zoning law that lays out conservation overlay districts and encourages the use of cluster subdivisions to retain large tracts of open space. There's the storm management law, which is aimed at controlling erosion and sediment. The town also has a plan to enhance the 9W business corridor, which includes pedestrian access, bike access, and other natural elements. The town, as I mentioned, participates in the Ulster County Hazard Mitigation Plan and has provided updates periodically. And it was also noted that the town's highway department is effective and proactive in paving, snow plowing, collecting trees, and runs a wood chipping program for the community that's really popular. You're muted, Howard.
And with that, there is a good snapshot of what the town of Ulster is capable of, even before we start to look at further areas of. Next slide, please. So one of the main things that can be done is to use state and nonprofit resources for resiliency planning. This is simply passing a resolution to join the New York Climate Smart Communities certification program sets you up to get better scores on grant applications, especially those from the DEC. It puts you on the map in terms of recognition for your community's leadership. And when green businesses get rid of this, they will start to come in droves because they want to be a part of a community that takes the lead on this. On the nonprofit side, you can do things like going to the Nature Conservancy and using their community resilience building workshop to help you more specifically and closely identify different hazards. And the Nature Conservancy will pay for it too. Let us use all the resources out there. Also, Ulster's comprehensive plan is indeed comprehensive. The town of Ulster did well here. The town of Ulster can follow further in its own plan by implementing the recommendations laid out within it. And if it was to be further appended, update the plan with more sustainability elements. And that's how you increase resilience further based on a plan that came from within. Next slide, please. In order to bolster resiliency, we focus on the floodplain. This is why we've been talking so much about the creeks and the storms and rising water, and expanding green development. This means wherever possible, retrofitting and or moving public buildings. This isn't just to get floodplain, but also to save on expenditure for energy as well. And once that is done, we suddenly find ourselves with more space to plan for green development in terms of parks and taking advantage of the natural resources that are the town of Ulster's waterways, like the Esopus, the Rondout, and the Hudson. Next slide, please. Continuing on this development track, we also must develop the town of Ulster's communications. Updating the town website would better engage the town citizens with the town's newest developments and potentially be a way to unite many of the town's citizens in their communication, because there is a lot of following on social media from the town of Ulster, and this could be a gathering. Not to mention, implementing a text or email messaging system would do a lot to bolster communication for the citizens in a case of a climate disaster, so that people know where to go and what to do. Not to mention the fact that that signage that went in was definitely a good start. Going further on that would better bolster the town of Ulster's resiliency still. Next slide, please. Beyond that, the next things that the town of Ulster has available to it are completing the Ulster County multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan update. The last update was quite old. It is time for a new one, especially given new information. Another thing would be to utilize free training opportunities for municipal staff and volunteers. Management issues, more free resources available out there. And where there aren't things that can be done freely, there are a number of potential grants and other sources to fund resiliency planning. Next slide, please. And we do understand that grant applications are time consuming, and considering how much the town of Ulster's citizens have pulled together to bring us together, there very likely are volunteers that would be happy to pursue this work. Eli, it's yours.
So moving on to our specific recommendations based off these opportunities. And just to reiterate what Howard said, there are a number of grant opportunities we lay out here. There's also a lot of resources and other support available from the state and other nonprofits and local organizations. And like Howard said, this is all, I think, a great opportunity to engage local citizens who care about the climate, who care about the environment, who care about their community to participate in this process. And that is a big part of the New York Climate Smart Communities program. But let's just rewind and talk a little bit about what the program is. It's a New York State program that helps local governments take action to adapt to changing environmental conditions, as well as reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The program offers free technical assistance, as well as grants and rebates for electric vehicles if the town is adding those to the fleet. CSC program participation and actions offer the town a wide range of funding opportunities, resources, and supports for resiliency planning and related development work. And also importantly, it puts the town on the radar of organizations like Cornell Cooperative Extension, with offers support, the Hudson River Estuary Program, Scenic Hudson, and Riverkeeper, that all have a range of consulting expertise and potentially grants that the town can use to help with their resiliency planning and climate goals. So like Howard mentioned, the first step is passing the municipal resolution to become a registered climate smart community. At that point, a coordinator for the process is then chosen, appointed, volunteers. It can come from inside the government or from a community, someone in the community that volunteers their time. And then there's also the Climate Smart Community organization that then comes together to help advance the program in the town. So this is, like I mentioned, is a great opportunity to engage local citizens who care about this. There's the framework for organizing local environmental action and highlighting priorities. There's the cost savings through greater efficiency. There's the reduction of future flood risks through climate change adaptation strategies. There's the conservation of green spaces for recreation and biodiversity. There's investment in an economy that supports green business and other sustainable growth. There's improved air quality from switching to clean energy. And of course, greater energy independence and energy security from doing that. And once the town takes the pledge, the town then moves towards the process of Climate Smart Community certification, which is gained by accumulating points from doing specific actions. Now, the way actions work is the town can actually choose which actions align with the laws, plans, and initiatives of the town, and help to access grants and funding for specific projects that align with the mission of the town. Communities always get to choose which actions are most relevant to their goals. And as New York State passes more climate legislation and moves towards tighter climate regulation, it provides an opportunity for the town to kind of take freedom to take control over their priorities related to climate change and resilience, rather than waiting for new regulation from the state. So it may be hard to read some of these, but I'm going to highlight my favorites, which are two local ones. Ulster County, which is a climate smart certified community, gets 100% of the county government energy from renewable sources. Kingston has a waterfront flooding task force, which prepares the community for rising sea levels. And Geneva, out a little bit to the west, includes friendly design and green space conservation. So the comprehensive plan, as we mentioned, is a really important place to address some of these issues. Climate Smart Communities program actions are broken into a number of different categories. I highlight some here on this list. Their PE stands for pledge element. So each pledge element is a different category of actions. These are also laid out in the gap analysis that I provided to Laura, so she hopefully will circulate that so you can always revisit this and take a deeper dive. And like I said, the town can choose which kind of actions to engage in first and down the line. So you could start with actions that save the town money, like energy efficiency, or that support the local economy, like a Shop Local campaign, or could be more directly related to resilience, like flood hazard mitigation, or public engagement, like a local climate action website. These actions and a number of these actions are already associated with goals laid out in the comprehensive plan or other existing town documents or programs that the town is already participating in, such as a local tree planting program like the nursery on Buckley Street or solar energy installation. Once again, these are laid out as well in the gap analysis document. But we see there's a number of these actions which are already well underway. We also lay out some other actions which, with our recommendations in this gap analysis. These may not be as far along in the process or laid out as explicitly as goals of the comprehensive plan, but they're all aligned with what we see as the town's goals and priorities. And just a little more on the grants. Becoming a climate smart community by passing the resolution gives you access to DEC grants, as well as NYSERDA and New York Department of State grants, and higher scores on other grant applications throughout New York State. And the most pertinent grant initially is this Partners for Climate Action Hudson Valley, formerly was called Lifeboats Hudson Valley, but they offer a local champions grant, which actually funds the Climate Smart Community Task Force Coordinator position. So you could actually compensate somebody from the community to devote their time to the initial process of working towards certification. This is something the town of Rochester did, and we learned from our classmates who presented to them how integral that position has been to helping move this process along, helping to access the grants, and helping to facilitate actions.
And with that, some of the recommendations we have for improving floodplain resilience and expanding green development. Previously, we did mention relocating or retrofitting municipal buildings and roads where there is risk for flooding. And we are aware that the town hall and the Town of Ulster's police station are both located at the purple tag near the top of that map, which is well within the Esopus's 100-year floodplain. We're also aware that the bold step is being taken to move those two sites to the western reaches of Tech City's lands to get it out of the floodplain. And that is one perfect example of an opportunity we've been discussing, both to move those sites somewhere safer and to create new green space that can incorporate flood and erosion control. For full reference, the black rectangles we're seeing on that map are the footprints of buildings. The ones wrapped in green are the buildings that still stand within Tech City. And definitely note where many of the buildings are in relation to that floodplain. We also know that even within the Ulster County multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan, there's also a plan to retrofit Ulster's wastewater treatment plant noted at that red tag in order to keep it safe from likely flooding. Next slide, please. At the center of much of this is Tech City. On top of providing another place to center the town of Ulster's operations and its police department, it also provides a great deal of space that may yet house green businesses and development. It's a wonderful, very large blank canvas that, with a commitment to green business, could very easily be filled with green businesses. working with the Ulster County Economic Development Alliance can help the town of Ulster establish plans to jumpstart green economic development of the tech city space. And working with the EPA could further spur cleanup and redevelopment of the entire property to get this process moving quickly. To that end, we also recommend that the town of Ulster establish a green economic development plan that can incorporate all of these elements and help the town of Ulster access resources that will help bring all of this to fruition, catering to green industries whose goods or services generally benefit the environment, save on natural resources, and or help deal with climate change. You can attract them and set the town up to continue to do this in the future. Next slide, please. On the green space side of things, the town of Ulster does have potential spaces that are already set up to be further developed into a good community green. In that inset picture is our very own Laura showing myself and Ibrahim the spot at the purple tag on the right where there is a small boat launch for the Esopus Creek. And not only does that make use of the Esopus Creek itself and of the town of Ulster's plans, it presents a golden opportunity to turn this into a developed park area that can double as flood protection for the surrounding neighborhood. And there have been different organizations that would be more than happy to help with this on a state level, a federal level, and a nonprofit level as well. Next slide, please. This is where the town of Ulster could potentially work with land trusts or other conservation organizations to provide funding to make plans like what I just described come to fruition. We know that this is happening already with the commitment from GlidePath to protect the original industrial site that they were planning on working at for conservatorship purposes. Campus has portions that itself could be converted into park space and further serve to attract green businesses. The current DEC tree nursery, also next to the Esopus Creek, also on Buckley Street, can be expanded into a park with community access to the water. The flood-prone area on Rondout Creek along Creek Locks Road can be developed for pedestrian access and flood mitigation simultaneously to keep that street flowing in more ways than one and with minimal water. Next slide, please. To further this on a political level, updating the town zoning law to include more recommendations from the town comprehensive plan will make both of those things more effective. Creating a ridgeline protection overlay district will and certain pollution of water sources in that way. And further on a safety grounds and on a pollution prevention ground, strictly enforcing DEC requirements for a 100-foot buffer between building, development, and water courses will both keep people safe and ensure the creation of more green space. On that note, it would also help to restrict the development of buildings and other impervious surfaces within the 100-year floodplain, not only to keep people safe, but to ensure that all stormwater finds its way back to water sources and not to more places where people live and work. To that end, requiring stormwater pollution prevention plans and working within the DEC state pollution discharge elimination system for commercial and industrial developments will help structure these aims to prevent further water pollution and to make sure that stormwater finds its way home and not into our homes. And on that end, there are quite a few funding and support opportunities for floodplain resilience and green development. The Hudson River Estuary Local Stewardship Planning Grant helps local organizations and communities advance water projects and programs with planning and design assistance. The New York Department of State has funding available for the design and implementation of local waterfront revitalization plans. NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, runs a website called climate.gov with a specific toolkit for funding municipal flood mitigation projects. The U.S. Climate Resilience Toolkit webpage has a listing of federal grants for climate resiliency projects, some of which come from FEMA, the EPA, the Wildlife Conservation Society, and even the USDA, the Department of Agriculture, and many other non-governmental organizations. Speaking of FEMA, this is right in the center of a lot of what they do as well, including pre-disaster mitigation grant program, flood mitigation assistance, and building resilient infrastructure and communities program, all of which point to different phases and parts of floodplain resiliency projects. Not to mention, at a very local level, you also have many of the organizations and nonprofits like Scenic Hudson, the Hudson River Watershed Alliance, the Lower Esopus Watershed Alliance, and of course, Riverkeeper. Next slide, please. The existing recommendations from the town comprehensive plan. And you already came up with this yourself, Town of Ulster. Update the town's zoning law. Look into local waterfront revitalization plans, and by all means turn to some of these groups for help. Consider building standards like Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, or LEED. It's one of many that can not only help create more resistant buildings, but also help save the town money in energy costs as well. And plant riparian protection zones with something like the DEC's Trees for Tribs program. Tribs meaning tributaries, and an example of which is pictured right here. Next slide, please. All of those would come very much in handy. Here we have Eddyville mapped, southern Town of Ulster, both of which may find themselves interrupted when Rondout Creek floods. And these kinds of plans can help mitigate that to keep that road passable should any of the communities near the Rondout flood. This way people have more options. Eli, bring it home.
I just wanted to quickly explain what a riparian buffer or stream buffer is. It's, as you can see from this image, it's a vegetated area that's planted near a stream or other water tributary with trees or other brush, which helps shade and partially protect the stream from the impact of adjacent land uses. And it increases water quality with associated streams, rivers, and lakes by filtering the. And if the stream or water body floods, it soaks up a lot of that water. So it serves two purposes. So continuing on the town comprehensive plan, moving past implementing existing items on the plan, there's also the opportunity to update the plan. This is a climate smart community action, updating the town comprehensive plan to include more sustainability elements. And a number of these ideas are already addressed in the 9W corridor development plan, such as supporting alternative modes of transportation. Designating open space and protecting it from development is addressed in the current comprehensive plan, but it's not explicitly laid out as a goal. fostering green economic development as well. Supporting energy efficiency and renewable energy production could also be explicitly added to the comprehensive plan, as well as protecting drinking water sources from pollution. Another key piece of our recommendations is assessing the vulnerability and risks of the town while also planning for disaster and recovery. There's a number of ways to do this. One is a localized hazard risk and vulnerability assessment, specifically for the town of Ulster. Some of these risks are laid out in the county plan, but it's really important to also have this done on a more detailed level locally. So this is like a cumulative risk assessment for how events or disasters could affect the town's internal operations, the people, the public health, the environment, the economy, and operating costs. And New York Department of State offers an assessment tool to help facilitate that process. There's also the opportunity to create a natural resource inventory, which is an action in climate smart communities. A natural resource inventory compiles information on important naturally occurring features within a given locality, such as the soil, the streams, the wetlands, the forests, or the wildlife. And the idea is by visualizing the area's resources, it identifies conservation priorities and strategies like zoning updates or specific open space protections, or the need for more detailed studies. And the Nature Conservancy also supports this work, both with resources and potentially funding. And it may be worth looking into what of this work might have been explored already. It's also important to establish Howard kind of laid this out, but looking at this from a hazard prevention and risk prevention side allows the town to potentially help move people from areas that are at high risk of flooding. And related to that, creating a formal town evacuation plan and installing signage about hazards and evacuation routes is something the town can do. As well as designing flood elevation maps. While there is a flood law for the town, there is not actually a flood elevation maps and the floodplain is not specifically laid out for development. And the town could also perform maintenance on culverts and dams, something that there is state funding available for. But I wanted to just talk a little bit more about developing strategies for public outreach and engagement, and acknowledge that we heard from Laura, the town has already decided to move forward with a website update, which is a key piece of a key opportunity that we identified in the CSRP tool, obviously. And the tool lays out a number of specific pieces of information that can be put on the town website, such as the ASPCA's disaster preparedness steps for domesticated animals, that help citizens with animals to know what to do in the event of an emergency, as well as a number of FEMA resources that can be put on the website. And to work towards a CSC action, you can actually add a section of the website about local climate action for residents and what they can do. Howard also mentioned the text and email messaging system, which may seem daunting, but can be pretty achievable with the email newsletter or other ways to get people to sign up on the website. And there also is an existing New York alert program, which anybody can sign up for, which then says text messages to citizens' phones if there are any natural disasters or risks or hazards in New York State. So that can be encouraged via the website or other outreach initiatives. And finally, the town can engage in more free training programs for officials and employees. FEMA Emergency Management Institute offers training on the community rating system, how that works, for insurance and FEMA support, as well as advanced floodplain management. There's also the FEMA Community Emergency Response Team, which trains first responders in disaster preparedness, and a number of other FEMA and New York State programs that are available for free training. We're at the end. And we hope our summary of findings helps you understand our perspective and what we've learned and our ideas about the community becoming more resilient. We understand and we've learned through this process, how much is on the plate for local governments and local community organizations. There's so many things to deal with that often this kind of work, applying for grants, doing this research, doing, putting together reports and all these things can be very, very daunting. Applying for grants can be very, very daunting. And I think what we kind of hope to get across here is that there's a lot of tools available, and there potentially are people in the community that would be willing to help engage with those tools and move these things forward. And that's really what the Climate Smart Community Program is all about. And like we said, community is key here, and this is really just the beginning. Our report would really benefit from any comments or feedback or ideas or updates from local stakeholders and local government. And hopefully, the participation of everybody involved will help expand the collective leadership on hazards and community resilience in the town of Ulster. We want to thank you for your time again, and just close with a question, which is, what are all of your top concerns and what do you see as the most pressing issues for the town to address resiliency planning? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Eli and Howard. And Monique, I have to say, if I were grading them, and I've never taught this topic or anything, but I would certainly give them an A. So I'm giving a plug for that. So thank you for all of your work on behalf of the town of Ulster. So I want to open the floor to anyone that might have questions. I'm going to start. I want to start with one question because we talked about at the beginning what this was all about, and I'd like to hear from both you, Eli and Howard. What has doing this meant to you? How much are you going to benefit from this experience? Howard, do you want to go first?
Yep, sure. Meant to me was that what we are doing is indeed vital and so timely that, frankly, it does not wait for us to graduate or finish up things. We need to address things immediately. So for one thing, there's a sense of urgency. For another, there's the weight of this. Whole communities are at stake here. And I'm quite proud to be able to step up and do what I can to help a community survive many of these things that are coming, especially one that, frankly, has done a lot to support me in a very short time. I spent a lot of time in Ulster, even just in the time that I've lived in the Hudson Valley, which has not been long. And as far as benefiting from this experience, other than a grade, I'm someone who until relatively recently hasn't had much experience outside of large cities. So coming out here gave me a piece of information and a sense of working with people that's long been missing from my own life. And I will take it with me everywhere I go after this.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you. Eli?
Yeah, I touched on it a little in the last slide, but just this really learning about how municipal governments operate. starting to see the inner workings and the town laws and regulations and plans really opened my eyes to how important it is, I guess, to be involved, to get involved, and to support local government. So, I live over here in Rhinebeck, and I've connected with one of the town board members who's been working on the Climate Smart Communities program over here. So I'm going to be getting involved here as well. So it's really kind of provided a kickstart and a new understanding and appreciation for how local government works. So it's exciting, and to really see, how everybody can make a big impact where they live is really inspiring.
Hear, hear.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both for all the work you've done. I'm really proud of, and I hope that doesn't sound trite, but I'm really proud of all that you guys have done, and I enjoyed the experience working with you. So thank you so much.
Can I just say something quickly? I would say for the team of students who work with the town of Rochester, as well as Eli and Ibrahim and Howard, I think that I've been teaching for almost 12 years in this climate and environmental program. And I think that students often don't realize how much local governments do, that how much responsibility they hold, how they impact people's lives, but also not just the governments, but how volunteer organizations as well, and people who volunteer. So this idea that, it's local government plus, people who live in the town. And so I'm in Rhinebeck, and I've been on various town committees in the past. And it's really, I think, really an interesting aspect of American politics, that you have elected officials, you have bureaucrats, but you also have community actors who contribute. And it's a very dynamic process. And the problems that you guys have to solve are immense and complicated. And I think that students often think that politics somehow only happen at the federal level or the state level. And so this is a really valuable experience for me as a professor, to enable my students to see the complexity of the day-to-day, decisions and budget managements and allocations that local governments have to do and counties have to do. It's really been very illuminating. And I said in the opening that we appreciate it, but I really am sincere, because for me as a teacher, there's nothing better than experiential learning. And, you guys have been, Laura, you've been an incredible trooper, Europa, in helping our students really engage in this. And we're very appreciative.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's open the floor. Anybody has any questions for the students or any comments? John? You have to unmute. There you are. There you are.
First, I'd like to say this was a very informative presentation, and I enjoyed it. One of the things that would have improved it for me personally is if I had a printed copy in advance of the presentation, so that I could have read it and studied it a little bit and had more of an opportunity to ask questions regarding it. What was the weather event in Phoenicia that you talked about initially?
That was Hurricane Irene, sir.
That was Irene. Now, Irene was in 2011, and I was in office with the supervisor at the time, and we had a lot of flooding in the town of Ulster from the Esopus Creek and from the Roundup Creek. Somebody had mentioned about utilizing volunteers and doing a lot of studies and writing grants and so forth and so on. I had the honor back in 2005 of being appointed to the Comprehensive Plan Committee that wrote the Comprehensive Plan, and I chaired it. So I'm very familiar with the comprehensive plan and what went into it and how it came about. And of course, it was supposed to be a living, breathing plan, which is what our hope was at the time, and still is our hope that it moves on. So the largest hurricane that we've had here in Ulster County occurred back in 1976, which was Hurricane Bell, which we've had 27 hurricanes here in Ulster County since 1930. So these are not new events. Certainly we want to try to stop them in the future, but just for history.
Thank you for that, sir.
Anyone else?
I just want to say thank you for your tremendous effort here in putting together a very large volume of work. It has been posted to the town's website. It is under the environmental tab, and tomorrow morning, Susie Reevy will be posting a banner across the top calling attention to the report so any of our interested citizens can review it. The town itself only received the report at 11 o'clock this morning. I'm not prepared to comment on it. We will be taking our time to go through it. I would hope that we can get a copy of the video. In addition, there was a slide, I believe it to be slide 11 or 13, which was the spreadsheet. If you could send me the spreadsheet. In addition, slide 8 was something that you picked up from Columbia University. Being in office 12 years and having walked many of these neighborhoods during flood events, I'm struggling to find 54, 62, and 65 structures that are going to be impacted. So any information that you can help me obtain in reference to their assumptions or their data would be very helpful. According to the AHAPS page, which is a National Weather Service data page, the historic crest in the last 70 years of the Esopus Creek at Mount Marion was 26.5 feet in 2005. The 2011 storm the hurricane is a perfect example of the effects of the Ashokan Reservoir in mitigating flooding. In 2005, the reservoir was full, and it happened in April. There was a tremendous snowpack at the time, and we had a week's worth of 60-degree weather, which caused tremendous snowmelt. Consequently, it came down. There was no void to absorb it in the Esopus, in the Ashokan Reservoir, and we had tremendous flooding in the town, which kind of tempered the elected officials' viewpoint towards flood preparation, and it kicked into high gear many changes that had taken place from 2005 forward, including the elimination of a trailer park that was on the west side of the Esopus across from the Town of Ulster wastewater treatment plant. That was totally removed because that was flooded out, as well as a number of mobile homes along the Roundout Creek, which was in that same time period because the Roundout Reservoir also was flowing pretty freely because of the snowmelt. So with that being said, I want to thank you again, and we're going to take and go through this with a fine-tooth comb.
Jim, I have their, they sent to me not long before the meeting the final draft of or I guess it's not a draft anymore, the final version of their gap analysis. So I will send that to you so you have it. And also the assessment tool. So I'll forward it. Anyone else have comments?
Mr. Quigley, I can provide a link to the to that Columbia University resource. It's a pretty interactive website where you can put in different information and it shows the map. Now, I don't know, where they got their GIS layers from and their data, but they do have, it's pretty interactive, so you can kind of see where they're coming up with these numbers.
I've already been through, I forget the website, but there was a website that I went through that showed the effects of the Hudson River elevation changes because of presumed climate change impacts. We've had tremendous discussion with the Ashokan Release Working Group and other groups along the Esopus as to what is going to happen in that environment, because, as you know, the Esopus Creek is not a tidal body, and the Rondow Creek is, for the most part, not a tidal body either in the town of Ulster because of the presence of the dam in Eddyville. That was tidal effects were removed in the early 1800s when the D&H Canal built the dam. That dam is not owned by the town. It is owned by a property owner who owns property on both sides of the creek and is currently subjected to a study by both the DEC and the Army Corps of Engineers about its removal. So the town does not have any input into that decision. But anything you can provide me that backs up statements that were made within here, within the presentation, would help us immensely.
Yes, that's all in the gap analysis, so you'll see it as you get a chance.
Great.
Anyone else? Clayton?
Just want to add my thank you. I appreciate your presentation, and thanks for keeping it efficient and giving us all the background data. That's a huge help when we consider this. We will look at this seriously. Thank you.
Thank you. Regis? You're muted.
Nothing that hasn't already been said. I'm really
Okay.
grateful to Bard for having presented this and did all this hard work with Eli and Howard, and it's terrific that the town is taking this very seriously. I think you heard that loud and clear, so that makes me very pleased on all fronts. Thank you.
Regis, how do you think they're going to feel after I respond? Like you do when you ask a question at the town board meeting.
Overwhelmed.
That is correct.
Just put it on a high volume stick. That's all you need.
We'll put you on mute, Jim. No, I'm kidding.
No, that's all right.
All right, I'm out of here. Good night, everyone. Thank you
All
very
right,
much.
Clayton, thanks so much for being here.
Thank
Feel
you.
better.
Thank you. Thank you.
Feel better.
Thank you.
All right. If we have no other comments, I just would like to say thanks, Jim, for being here, and to Clayton and John and Brian also. Thank you for being here. I know you have so many meetings every night, so I appreciate your attendance here. The county keeps you pretty busy. And isn't this a climate smart meeting night for the county?
Answer. Usually the county, yes, it is tonight, right, Brian?
Yeah, I think so, yep.
So you're both playing hooky. Thank you.
It was actually luckily canceled. Sorry.
Oh,
it's okay.
Okay. And Europa, thank you for all of your help. I am forever indebted to you, and grateful for the time we spent together. So thank you. And Monique, also for all of your support and letting this happen and letting it take over your class. And Tara, for your help throughout the process. Thank you very much. And of course, mostly to Eli and Howard for all of the hard work, and to Ibrahim, who could not be here. Thank you all so much for the work that you put in. Much appreciated. And if there's anything you guys ever need, you know, just let me know.
Thanks again, Laura.
Okay.
And everyone. Yes.
Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for listening.
Yeah,
You
great
did a
job, you
fantastic
guys.
job.
Good night. Thank you so
Good
much.
night.
Great
Thank
job.
you.
Thanks
so
for
much.
everybody for being here. We had over 20 people at one point, so thank you all. And Evelyn, nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Really enjoyed the presentation.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
All right,
Bye-bye.
everybody,
Everybody.
have a good night. And we're less than 90 minutes. We did good. Good night.
Good night.
Yeah, thanks, Laura.
Thanks.